some people will say they're going to keep some rapid acting insulin available just in case they have to correct, because it's a very correcting. Is that part of the scheme as well?
Correct. So now let's suppose you're off on your calibration. Okay. Like, here's a typical situation. It's Sunday. We're having a steak dinner. Dave normally boluses 10 units of regular for a 22-ounce steak. Okay. But Dave didn't exercise today. So his insulin sensitivity is a little bit lower than normal because he doesn't practice on Sundays. So guess what happens? There's not enough basal to cover basal's kind of covering the fat in the meal. So that's the kind of ball game where, so now what do? He starts to, after 3 hours, he's like 110 or 115. What do you do? Well, you want to bring him down. So you want to use fast insulin there. But the beauty of the Bernstein thing is if you're off just a little bit, you don't have to use a big dose of insulin to bring them down. So a unit right in the muscle of rapid acting is going to work twice as fast. Mm-hmm. And that typically does the trick. And if he goes too far down, you give him a little glucose. So that's this balancing game, but it's not like you're life, death, life, death, life, death. It's this kind of nudging that occurs, and the control is you have fine control rather than this,
Yeah, that's in a contrast to somebody that might eat a lot of carbs and they misdiagnose, or they misdose themselves, and then now they're looking at a blood glucose of 240, 280. So then they slam in some more insulin, and now they overcorrect, and now they're in the 40s and they're hypoglycemic, and so they immediately start shoveling anything sugary they can possibly get, because they feel awful, and then they overcorrect that. Now they're back over at 180, and it's just a it's like riding a crazy surf type thing. I know there's a book out there called Sugar Surfing. I can't remember who wrote that book, but that's another one where they kind of talk about. Is Dave wearing a CGM? Have you found any?
Yeah, Dave. That's kind of like, you can't beat it, right? You have to. The sugar surfing people. But if you look at the people who are sugar surfing, they're all out of control. So there's and then I've seen him post pictures where his blood sugar's flat. Took a picture of all this stuff. Oh, he ate low carb that day, and then I saw someone challenge him to eat French fries and all that, and his blood sugar went up to 200 or 250, and he had 30 units or 20 units of rapid acting insulin in him at midnight. And the life experience of someone, like if Dave goes to bed after eating a steak, and he'll have a few units of regular on board, but a lot of these kids are going to bed with 20, 30 units of rapid acting insulin on board, and the parents feel like, the kid has to have the cake, and we're gonna make sure that he eats normal like all the other obese kids, and they overwhelm these kids with so much insulin, so it's like a disaster. So the difference between what's happening with Dave and other kids who follow this and the general population, which is following the diabetes industry protocols, is astonishing in terms of not just their future outcomes, but their day-to-day quality of life.
Outside of the uncontrolled, rapid vacillating swings in blood sugar, which is just miserable in experience. I mean, I'm told it, you go from feeling awful hyperglycemic, then you feel even worse hypoglycemic, and you're back and forth with that. Is there any other downside to using lots of insulin? If you're using, let's say you're using, 40 units a day versus someone that's using 150. What is the downside of just insulin alone? Is there anything that you're aware of?
You can speculate, but what we know now in the type 1, in the last 10 years, what's happened is, let's say like in the 90s, if you were a type 1 and you're a kid, the parents, you'd be told by the nurses, there's an exchange system. You can have this kind of food or that kind of food. We don't have sugar. Now the kids are encouraged. That's what insulin's for. You don't have to, we don't want you to change your diet. You eat like everybody else. If you don't eat these processed goods, you're going to have a bad relationship with food. You're going to hate your kids are going to hate you. They tell the parents. The kids are one day, then they're going to hate their parents. They're going to go off and sneak foods. They won't be able to live a normal life. And so what is the result? The result is there's even a phrase like cake first, diabetes second, or kids first, diabetes second, they say. So what is the result? The obesity, so type 1 kids were once lean. Now, type 1 kids are more obese than their non-diabetic counterparts, where obesity is an epidemic levels. It is so that clinicians can't even tell when these kids come in if they've got type 1 or type 2. It's like astonishing. And you saw yesterday, or the last few days, now they're, the all of a sudden there's this big push by pharma to medicate obesity in children. Yeah, out of the blue, right? Where did that come from?
Well, it's definitely going to make them some money. But I mean, and I don't know if you're aware of it, there was a study out there recently that looked at cancer rates in type 1 diabetics. And those that were in the high insulin utilization group had higher rates of cancer than those in the low. And I think the cutoff was 0.5 units per kilogram. So if you're 100 kilograms using 50 units or less a day was considered low risk for cancer. And then if you're up closer to, 8, I think it was 0.5.
Good.
Yeah, so it's higher. So you higher cancer, which makes sense. I mean, you think about it.
Cancer is also at in non-diabetic levels, 5.0 and up, you see signals for it going up. So, whether it's the hyperglycemia or the insulin, that's a fun physiologic fact story. But with the Bernstein case and what we've showed in pediatrics, and is the overwhelming experience by everybody, is your insulin levels go way down. And that's probably the thing you got to be most careful of when you switch over. Your insulin level is going to almost for sure go down, and your blood sugar is going to be normalized. So which one made you healthy? Probably both. But the complications from hyperglycemia come on pretty fast if you start looking at the literature. So, I guess it's a win-win, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, when we look at that hyperglycemia, peripheral neuropathy, gastroparesis, small vessel disease, retinopathy, nephropathy, all that stuff. I mean, it's just an absolute nightmare. And then all these other things you don't really hear about. Visual changes, whatever. I mean, it's probably everything. It's probably
frozen shoulder.
Yeah, all the orthopedic stuff. I'm sure it's fair to say that every single system in your body will be affected negatively by diabetes. There's not a single thing you can think about. Yeah, your brain, your heart, your lungs, your reproductive system, everything is affected negatively.
It's funny. I post a lot about all this stuff on Type 1 Grit. Like if you're a parent of a boy, and you hear about the brain structure, and these are published in major journals, or you hear about impotence, ED, from high A1C, you would think, and then all you have to do is basically get rid of the junk food to avoid these problems. You would think that, and it's always been a puzzle to me, why is there less? And then I started to listen to Joan Ifland, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. And she brought up the UPF food addiction stuff. And I said to her, I don't think you can come up with a better example of how intensely addictive the processed food is than with type 1 parents who refuse to take away those foods from the family, even though they can see the result on their meters and know what the outcomes are going to be. So that's like one little takeaway that I have, is that's probably a root cause. Of course, you can't blame anyone because they've never been given the right training or the right education. They've been thrown off the track multiple times in their diabetes journey by the industry. But there's also this, and of course, we realized right away that when Dave switches, I have to switch. I was fat. And we all had to switch. So I switched right away. But I used to go to spin class and then I'd go to Starbucks and have a chocolate chip cookie. And I quit the cookie, but I would get the coffee still. And that cookie was like calling my name when I was standing in front of that. And it made me, I laughed. I thought, God damn, this stuff is really addictive, right? I'm conflicted. There's voices in my head trying to convince me to eat the cookie, right? So the situation stinks from every direction. You have to, you get the wrong training. The food that you've been told to eat, you've become comfortable with is, turning you into addicted, obesogenic parent, on and on and on, the problems.